Our next witness is Bev, is it?
Yes, sir.
Bev.
Please state your full name
Beverley and Tumelty.
and repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely
I do solemnly and sincerely
and truly declare and affirm
and truly declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Bev, we've heard from Gaynor about Hayden,
Yeah.
and you're going to give evidence about yours and Hayden's brother, Gareth.
Yes.
We've got a photo we're going to put on screen. Paul, it's 24120003, please. We'll just turn it round. And when was that photo taken?
That was Christmas 87. Gareth was in hospital again. I was heavily pregnant with the next generation of haemophiliacs as it happened. Joseph was born 6 days later.
And you went to visit him. You weren't sure that you wanted to be there at Christmas time.
Yeah,
but
nobody really wants to
go.
visit a hospital on Christmas Day, but he was there, he was on his own. So that's where I went.
And we'll keep the photo up other than when we have documents to put up. What was it like growing up with Gareth and Hayden?
It was busy. It was a busy childhood. I was the youngest of 5 children, so 4 elder brothers, and then I was the youngest. It was, they were constantly in and out of hospital with one bleed or another, but it was quite we were a happy little gang, definitely. We had quite a chaotic childhood. My mum was a single parent, but we formed a little gang together, really, and they made me very happy.
And Gareth, like Hayden, had haemophilia A.
Yeah.
How did that affect him growing up?
They were very, very similar, really. Hayden was more stoic, more measured in how he dealt with things. Gareth was definitely the more fiery of the brothers. He hated going back and forth to hospital. They had many, many admissions. My earliest memories are of being in a hospital with them, waiting to be seen, or of them on one sofa or another, or in a cast or a splint. That's just how life was.
And when he started to receive factor VIII, you said in your statement that was hailed as a wonder drug, something miraculous.
Oh, 100%, yeah. Factor VIII was the panacea cure-all wonder drug. It was considered it was going to be, the resolution to all their problems. With so many bleeds into different joints, you could get osteoarthrosis and lots of joint problems, and factor VIII. We welcomed it at the time. It was considered definitely the wonder drug.
And as far as you know, was Gareth given any advice or warnings about any risks of infection?
No, I don't remember him reporting any conversations to me. The only conversation that I remember was of him telling us that he was HIV positive and that it was considered to be a terminal diagnosis at the time.
And that was 1984, you think?
Yeah, my recollection, because it wasn't long after I met my husband, I'm pretty certain it was the end of 1984 that he told us as a family. It might, my recollection might be a bit, because I know Gaynor's statement was 85, but I'm certain it was like November 84 when Gareth told us.
And you've waded through your words and your statement, Gareth's notes.
Yeah.
From a nursing perspective, as well as a sister's perspective, because you're a nurse.
I'm just, nosy, I suppose. I wanted to look at them myself and see if I could pick out any salient points.
And you've observed in your statement there's lots of chunks missing and there's nothing which shows when Gareth tested positive for HIV or HTLV3 and when he was told.
Yeah, there's, there are lots of notes, lots of what I would call the bread and butter of hospital visits. Gareth presented with a bleed to A, B or C joint, had some treatment or had to be admitted. But the very important conversations of you are HIV positive, you are Hep C positive, I couldn't find any documentation to say he was called into the haemophilia centre for those very important conversations that should be well documented. I couldn't find them.
And when Gareth told the family, you said in your statement, he told them soon after he'd been told, as far as you can recollect.
Yeah, that's our recollection of events, that he told us quite soon, yes.
And he thought, and you thought, that he was going to die, and you didn't think he'd see the following Christmas?
No, that was the information that they were given at the time. You have HIV, and it will develop into AIDS, and you will die within a few years. That was the information they were given.
Gareth had been newly married at that time.
Yeah.
And not long after the diagnosis, that marriage came to an end.
Yes, yeah, it did. It was, Gareth was, very angry, understandably. There were, it caused huge issues in their relationship and with his wife's extended family, I believe, who didn't cope well with the diagnosis. They were also advised not to have children because of the HIV infection. And that had a massive impact on the relationship, and the marriage ended.
And you've described in your statement that at that stage Gareth went AWOL.
Yeah, that's how I definitely describe it. He, he just removed himself from the family to a certain extent. He got a flat and he withdrew into himself, I suppose. I would imagine he was quite depressed. He would see people when he chose to, but a lot of the time you didn't see him for quite long periods. Yeah.
And he ended up being admitted to hospital on a pretty frequent basis with infections.
Yeah, he was. I think the initial treatment that you had for HIV in those days was AZT. The massive doses that people were given, was the issue then, not the HIV. It caused, such deterioration in the immune system that people were getting infections and neutropenia as a cause of that, not as a cause of their HIV.
You've also described how Gareth wasn't always compliant with his medication regime.
No, he definitely wasn't. He was, what shall I call him? A bit of a lone wolf. He thought he could manage his own condition. Lots of times he would be given medications and then would decide whether to take them or not. He tried lots of combination therapies over the years. And then at other times, he would be very compliant and decide, no, I want to live, I want to fight this disease. And at other times, I think there were periods where he just didn't want to take them and he just wanted to die because of, the ripples in the pond effect of his family life and relationships dissolving. It just distressed him too much.
Because he had remarried, but that relationship broke down too.
Yeah, he remarried. And she had 2 young children, and Gareth, brought those up as his own. They called him Dad. He never adopted them officially, but with the ongoing stress of everything that HIV and then the Hep C diagnosis encompassed, there was just too much stress on the relationship, and that marriage ended as well.
And you characterised it this way in your statement: living with HIV and constant illness and upset ruined his relationships.
I 100%. He was also a very fiery character, up and down mood-wise. So I'm sure that made him very difficult to live with. So I'm not blaming those partners. I'm sure they tried very hard to sustain the relationships, but he could be very difficult to live with, yeah.
In terms of the hepatitis C diagnosis, that's something he became aware of at some point in the early 1990s. And we're just going to look at 3 documents and try and pinpoint that. Paul, could we have up on screen, please, 2412006? We can see this is a result from February 1991, and the bottom right-hand corner reveals antibody to hepatitis C virus detected. So that's February 91. We then, if we could have, please, Paul, 2412004, we can see a letter written by a Dr. Davis to Gareth saying this: your blood tests show evidence that you've been exposed to the hepatitis C virus. This may mean that you will require specific drug treatments in the future, although this is by no means certain. We would like to discuss this further with you at the Haemophilia Centre and would ask if you could make an appointment to see either Dr. Dasani or myself. Now that's informing Gareth of his diagnosis, but if we just look at the date, that's the 21st of July 1993. Yeah. So that's over 2 years after that test result.
Yeah.
And then we saw with Hayden's notes that it was a few days after that we see a record of a discussion with Hayden about hepatitis C in his notes. And then we'll just have one further document from Gareth's notes, please, 2412005. We can see this is a letter, again from the Haemophilia Centre. It's the day after the day sending the letter that we've just looked at, so it's the 22nd of July. And it says this: Dear Mr. Lewis, all the haemophilia centres in the UK are participating in an audit to assess whether the services we provide are satisfactory. As part of this, Dr. Charles Hay from the Royal Liverpool Hospital will be visiting the centre shortly, and then there's reference to questionnaires. So around the time the diagnosis is communicated, there's an audit being undertaken of the haemophilia centre's services.
Yeah. It's a bit telling, really, isn't it?
You've described in your statement, in the years that followed in the 1990s, a very difficult time for Gareth.
Yes.
What can you recall about that?
He was quite depressed, I think, quite volatile. He was difficult to engage with as a brother. He was very angry about lots of things, especially the death of Colin Smith, affected them massively. And it was almost like a turning point, if you like. They, started to turn things around and try and get some positives, try and find some answers, and setting up support groups for people that were infected and affected by all of this. The numbers are huge. They're massive. When you look at the total figures, in Wales alone, it's 300. And I believe that had all these people died on the same day in history, that the enormity of it would have been realised sooner. But of course they didn't. So, you have 2 people die in 1 month and then another. But since the inquiry's been launched, it's 1 person dying every 4 days from this. And it's quite shocking.
And you've said in your statement how at this time Gareth was devoting a lot of his energies to campaigning, but also overwhelmed with sadness.
Yeah. His grief when Colin died was phenomenal. It affected him massively. He looked at that little boy as a little brother, I suppose. He loved him phenomenally. It was horrible to see that grief. I'd seen him go through the breakup of 2 marriages, and of course he was saddened by that, but that little boy's death was devastating to him. It changed him completely.
And there was one time when Gareth had been prescribed steroids following pneumonia, and then he stopped taking the steroids, and that initiated what you've described as a manic episode.
It was horrible. At the time, him and Tracy were separated, but Louise, Tracy's daughter, was still, I don't think she was living there totally, but she was staying with him, and he'd become unwell. And the issue was he'd been given some steroids, which is quite a potent drug. He felt very well on them, so he was taking extra because he felt so well. And subsequently, he ran out of those medications before he should have. And when you stop steroids very suddenly, or when you take steroids, it can induce psychotic episodes. And that's what happened. Louise rang me or texted me to say Gareth's behaving oddly. She didn't know what to do with him. Could I call down the house? And there was just uproar. He was pacing around, behaving very erratically. He'd cut up shoes. He'd painted his fridge silver. He thought, there was some alien invasion. It was, when we talk about it in retrospect as a family, we can laugh about it now, but at the time it was terrifying. We didn't know what to do with him. He wouldn't sleep, he wouldn't rest. He'd, emptied wardrobes, and he was a very ordered, very tidy person. His house was just a complete mess. It was very scary. I tried to ring the mental health team to come and assess him. In desperation, I rang the haemophilia centre and asked them to bleep the consultant, Peter Collins, as in, you have to help me. I don't know what to do with him. He's completely crazy. And thankfully, Peter Collins did help and got the mental health team involved. They wanted to section him at the time to take him to a place of safety, but we decided as a family that we would keep him home and sit with him. And there's people here who helped us at that time to, sit with him for shifts, because he literally wasn't sleeping. You would get him to sleep and he would sleep for 3 minutes and then be up again, pacing around. He bought things, very expensive things, that, I probably could ill afford. Ian and I had to go and pick up an African grey parrot from a pet store that he'd bought for £1,400 that he didn't need, and subsequently that parrot made him ill, gave him a chest condition called psittacosis, so the parrot had to go. But yeah, it is funny now, but at the time it was horrendous. It was horrible.
And you said in your statement he did recover, and he returned to campaigning.
Yeah.
The work with the Birchgrove group and others.
Yeah. As Gaynor's already said, the Birchgrove group started as just a drink in the local pub, which was the Birchgrove pub, and a few more people would turn up, and then it grew into bigger and better things, and a national support group, and then they fundraised and raised money for the stone dedication ceremony in part of the Woodland Trust near Stratton, dedicated to the haemophiliacs who have been infected and who have died, and they planted 1,200 trees there as well.
And we saw the video earlier this week of Gareth.
Yeah, it was a lovely day.
And he'd not been able to work, but campaigning became his work.
Yeah, 100%, along with the Haemophilia Wales groups, Birchgrove, and then subsequently Tainted Blood group. That was his life, definitely. That's all he did, just campaigning and setting up support groups, along with other people. Sue Threckle, I can see here. Lots of them have died, but they've continued to make the group bigger and stronger, and they've got newer members now, but never forgetting the ones that were instrumental in starting it, really.
Can you recall what treatments Gareth received for hepatitis C?
Initially, I thought that he had some treatment because Gareth he would lie, basically, and say he was taking the relevant treatments and that he'd been put on treatments, and we'd be, oh, that's fantastic, great, you're going to be... for what reason, I don't know why he would do that. Maybe to shut us up and stop us nagging him. But he didn't have any treatment for hepatitis C. It was in discussion with the Haemophilia Centre that, as Gaynor has reported, the interferon and ribavirin are just brutal treatments. They severely can affect your mental health, and I don't think Gareth would have been in a fit state to maintain the treatment and to persevere throughout it, really. I think, he would have probably killed himself, because his depressive state, his mental health wouldn't have tolerated it.
And how was his physical health?
His physical health was very up and down. At the time he died, he was quite healthy. He was on his combination therapy, he was very well, very upbeat mentally, but at periods of time throughout the years, there were many times that we thought he was going to die, where he became so emaciated. There was a particular time where he developed a type of pneumonia called PCP, which was awful. The drug regime for that was particularly brutal, and we thought he was going to die then, but he did survive, picked himself up again. But yeah, there were many times that we thought he was going to die.
And you've referred in your statement to the stigma he would sometimes be exposed to when he was receiving health treatment.
Yeah, he was... it surprises me as a nurse that there is still some wariness within some health professionals about HIV. I remember when he was in hospital having a hip replacement, and I think it was the people that were taking the bloods, shouted, not shouted, but it was in a loud enough voice for people to hear of his HIV and Hep C status, that he was a high-risk patient, and, be careful when you were taking blood from him. And he was in a 4-bedded ward, and she was across the corridor, so it was loud enough. Everybody heard that, all the other patients in that room. And there's no need of it, really. It's not appropriate, and it's not professional.
Gareth didn't keep the fact of his infections secret.
No.
He was open about that with people, but he didn't always receive the best of receptions from people he told. No, definitely not. In the early days especially, when he was first diagnosed, work colleagues and things wouldn't drink from the same mug as him, or they would clean the loo after he'd been to the loo. He left a few jobs because of the way that he was treated, and just people's misconceptions of how, I think, in those days, how HIV is transmitted or how he got it. I think lots of people assumed that it had been sexually transmitted from risky behaviour, if you like, and it wasn't fully known then exactly how he'd been infected. We've heard how Hayden died in May of 2010, and it was towards the end of that year, in December 2010, that you and your husband and daughter and Gareth went on holiday to Spain, where you have other family members.
Yes, my other brother Mark lives there with his wife and 2 girls.
And what happened whilst you were on holiday?
Gareth was due to go to Spain that Christmas, so he was going for an extended period, but he wasn't due to fly out till about the 20th. And then myself and my husband decided that we would go for a nice quiet week before Christmas. I found some cheap flights, booked them, and spoke to Gareth and said, oh, we're going over on such and such a date. And he was like, oh, well, if you're going, I'm coming earlier. And he changed his flights and came, the same day. So he flew from Birmingham, we flew from Bristol. And we all arrived at the same time. And it was a great weekend. So we had 2 really good days. The Saturday was just forever memorable for all the wrong reasons. Just in the village, everybody got very, very drunk, and there was a live band in the cafe, and it was fab. Gareth was dancing and messing around. Everyone was having a great time, and he, wanted, as ever, wanted to party till the wee small hours. I think I left them to it about 3 a.m. The next morning, when we all got up, I think Gareth had made it through to 6 a.m, but got back to the house. The Sunday then was very quiet. We were all very subdued, very hungover, and we were just putting the Christmas tree up for Mark and Tracy. We had a Christmas bow making competition, which were, they're ridiculous bows, but we've got pictures of them. And then the Monday, we were going out for the day, just going to a place called Torre del Mar, just for the day, because the weather is lovely there that time of year. My brother thinks it's cold because he's lived there forever, but it really isn't cold. And we took 2 cars to drive into the village, and we were going to stop for a coffee and a sandwich. And then I drove into the car park, and as I drove into the car park, my brother's father-in-law was waving at me across the car park, so I just waved back like a fool. And then I saw the look on his face, beckoning me to come over. So I ran over, and Gareth was trying to get out of the back of the car, but he'd clearly, he'd collapsed. I could tell immediately he'd had a massive stroke, the one side of his face was drooped, and his left side. And I was like, we need to get to the hospital. Just get him back in the car. We drove to the clinic, and there's an amazing clinic in the village that my brother lives. They're just fantastic. Took him in there, and they were brilliant. They examined him and decided to transfer him to another hospital nearby where they could scan him. And they scanned him, and his conscious level was very bad then. There's an assessment process called the Glasgow Coma Scale. So 15 out of 15 is you and I. And then his coma scale was 10 at that time, which meant that he couldn't reply properly. He had a deficit to the one side. So they said it's very bad. He had a subdural hematoma and a massive bleed in the base of his brain. And they didn't know what had caused it. So they wanted him then transferred to another hospital, the neurosurgical unit in Malaga, and we went there. They transferred the scan images. They had spoken to the neurosurgical people on the phone, and because his conscious level at that time was deemed treatable, they decided that they would transfer him to the hospital, but by the time we got there, his coma scale was 5. And you can score 3 when you're dead. So he was almost dead. And then this all happened very quickly, with a matter of hours. He collapsed about midday, and he was dead by 8 p.m. that evening. Then the surgeons came out. They wanted to take us into a little side room, and I completely lost my cool then, because I know what those conversations are. I don't want to go in the room. I'm not going in the room. I don't want to listen to this conversation. But we did. They put the scan pictures up on the wall. And I feel I should explain here, I work in neurosurgery in Cardiff. So the minute I knew it was bad, but the minute I saw those scan pictures, I knew that you know, there was no hope for him. It was a devastating brain bleed. It was impossible, and they said they wouldn't do any surgery, they wouldn't ventilate him, and that they would transfer us back to the other hospital for him to die. And that's exactly what happened. They transferred him, put him into a side room. I was on my own with him. They had all monitors on him, and I asked the nurse, please just take them off, because I knew what was going to happen to him. As a nurse, I'd seen patients die like that, and I knew all the alarms were going to go off when someone's brain is so compromised. There are certain mechanisms the body will go through. The temperature will rise, the pulse will slow, the blood pressure widens, and I just wanted the alarms not to go off. The nurse asked me what I wanted done, and I said, just sedate him, just give him some medication that he just dies peacefully. And she went off to sort that out, but it was too late. It just all happened very quickly. And the process that he does is called coning. His brain just collapsed, and he just died very quickly. It was the most distressing day of my life, because I knew what was going to happen. I had no control over it. I wasn't his nurse, I was his sister. There was nothing I could do. I just had to sit, tell him that everything was going to be all right, but I knew it was not that. I mean, I think, you know, he may have heard me, I don't know. But 100% the most distressing day of my life. And having to make those phone calls, I think, when I rang you, wasn't it, to say that Gareth was had collapsed. I think you swore at me, didn't you? Yeah. And no, I think Gaynor thought I was joking, but I wouldn't. But yeah, just within 7 months of each other, it was impossible to comprehend at the time. It was just, how did this happen when they'd survived so long with the HIV, Hep C, and then they died within 7 months of each other? It was, yeah, incomprehensible.
Because of Gareth's HIV, he had no health insurance.
That's correct.
And you couldn't repatriate his body to the UK.
No.
And you as a family had to take what you said was a very difficult decision to have Gareth cremated in Spain and then bring his ashes back for a memorial service. Yeah, it was quite, there were lots of phone calls, especially Sue, and I still thank her. To this day, she made lots of rush phone calls and emails to try and gather some funds to get him repatriated, but we just didn't want people stressing about it or fretting in any way. And so as a family, we made that decision. No, we would have him cremated in Spain and then do some sort of service then when we got back to the UK. Was it the right decision? I do have certain regrets about it, that it sort of excluded some family members or others who may have wanted to attend that ceremony, but in our turmoil at the time, we made the best decision we could at that time. And there was a memorial service back in Cardiff, and you've said in your statement the sheer volume of people who attended was testament to the respect he had within the campaign groups and the haemophilia community. Yeah,
definitely. I remember we were organising it, and I was fretting that nobody would come. I thought it would just be immediate family. I don't know why I thought that, because I knew, you know, how well respected in spite of his fiery nature and how many, you know, fallouts he had with lots of people within the campaign society. I just thought there would be a handful of people, but it was phenomenal. It was an amazing day. It was good, you know, and people spoke about him, and they spoke about him in the correct way. They really spoke about him and the way he was. They got his character. My husband spoke about him in the eulogy. Sue spoke about him, Mark Ward, and they they really did get his character and how he was, because he wasn't a saint. He was quite a difficult person, and he upset lots of people over the years, me as well. But he was my brother. I loved him, but they did him proud that day, definitely.
And there's a description of him in Stephen's statement about his Uncle Gary that I'm just going to read out. It says this: in the early 1990s, my Uncle Gareth began taking us to Cardiff City Football Club matches. It became a regular thing. It was great to bond with my uncle in this way. We even used to travel to away games all over the country with my brother and cousins. We carried on this tradition over the years and still did after he died in 2010. I now take my son to watch them. I still feel like my uncle is there with us. It seems silly, but I feel like I see ghosts down there sometimes out of the corner of my eye. He was known as Uncle Gary down the city, even by friends of ours who weren't related to him. He was just one of the lads, and the hole he left was impossible to fill. Gareth didn't hide his condition from anyone. He didn't give a shit what anyone thought. He was a proud man and walked with his head high. I was proud to have him as my uncle. When my parents needed a break, he was there to look after us. When my dad had one of his many hospital visits, he was there for us. He took my brother and I under his wing and treated us not so much as nephews but equals. He was an older, inspirational figure to us. We respected him, but we could get away with stuff around Gary that we wouldn't dream of saying or doing around other family members. Basically, the coolest uncle two teenagers could hope to have.
That's about right.
You've referred in your statement to the fact you've had counselling, and you've said it sort of helped, but you've said this: I still don't think any of it makes sense, and both Gareth and Hayden should be alive. It's just wrong from start to finish.
It is wrong. It's, there's no escaping that fact. They should still be here. They should be sat here today giving this evidence. I fear that I can't do them justice. I fear I'm not as knowledgeable or as eloquent. I can give you the story from my side, but they were best placed to do this job. And when I think about HIV nowadays, it's considered a chronic manageable illness. It's not considered a death sentence. There are many people living, working, managing their lives with HIV and living their best lives and long lives. Hepatitis C is a very different matter. Hepatitis C is a far more virulent virus, and I think when they were infected with Hep C, as a medical professional, I knew that it would be that would be their downfall, not the HIV. And it was. And although Gareth's death was from a bleed, it's since been highlighted and found out that there are some haemophiliacs who have died from catastrophic brain bleeds. And it may be that it's due to the chronic hepatitis C infection. We don't know, but it just seems too familiar a story to me.
Bev, those are the questions I have for you. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I have written something that I would like to say, if that's okay. It is very short. It's only about 2 minutes. I might get it wrong. It's handwritten, but I'll do my best. Hayden and Gareth Lewis, along with my 2 other brothers, Neil and Mark, were my safe place. We had a chaotic childhood, and they were my constant guardians, my heroes, my moral compass. They were dealt a huge blow to their health in the prime of their lives, and it changed them completely. They did not let it define them. Many here today can testify to that. They turned it around and managed to help others and started a search for the truth. The rest is history unfolding before our eyes. If they were here today, they would be far more eloquent than I could ever be, but they are not, and we have to accept that fact. I do not accept that they received the best available treatment of the day, or the viruses it contained were unfortunate consequences. Cost-cutting, unlawful, unethical experimentation, and international commercial profit-making on blood products treated as a commodity are, in my opinion, many of the drivers of the tragedy we now see before us. The search for the truth has been a frustrating and laborious process, complicated and obstructed by hand-washing of officials and health authorities, and downright indifference by ministers and politicians, who it seemed thought that those affected would die before the enormity of these events were realised. They have died and continue to die, one every 4 days since the launch of this inquiry. They fail to account for the bereaved and the bereft who continue the fight for closure. I hope that by giving evidence today, I have honoured my brothers and all of those infected and affected. On their behalf, I wish to thank the inquiry, and especially Sir Brian, for examining and uncovering the facts so that justice can be done, lessons are learned, and that a tragedy of this magnitude can never happen again.
You can see by the reaction that everyone here thinks you have honoured your brothers.
Thank you.
And everyone here thinks that you have had the eloquence which you don't think you have, and you have done them justice in a remarkable display of measured affection and, I suspect, a degree of well-controlled anger. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll take a break until 1:30. 1:30.